Good evening. Today, I welcome you all to the sixth episode of this lecture series on understanding Marxism by Professor Pranab Kanti Basu. So, without wasting any time, I request Professor Pranab Kanti Basu to deliver his lectures so that after the lecture ends, we can go for an interactive session as usual. Over to Professor Pranab Kanti Basu.
Today we will be discussing capitalism. In our last class, we discussed class. So I will just recapitulate and define the scope of our lecture. Can I be heard? Can I
Yes,
be
yes,
heard?
yes. Of course,
And I
yes,
can be seen also.
yes,
Acha, and the slide can be seen?
yes.
Okay.
It's okay.
So we had argued that Marxist analysis is based on dialectics as overdetermination. Dialectics as overdetermination, meaning that it is different from Hegelian essentialist dialectics, and it is also different from the mechanical dialectics of Feuerbach, which is in itself essentialist. Now, because Marxist dialectics is non-essentialist, this leaves the entry point into analysis a matter of political choice. See, if there is an essence, then obviously the essence will it will define where you start your analysis from. But if there is no essence, you have to choose where you'll start your analysis from. We had defined class processes as processes of production, appropriation, distribution, and receipt of surplus. We argued that Marx chose class as the entry point to his analysis because of his commitment to economic emancipation, though his ultimate goal was human emancipation from all repression and exploitation. So, uh, economic emancipation, that is the emancipation from class, from exploitation. To understand what exploitation, how exploitation occurs, we need the concept of class, because class, as we have defined, is the process of production, appropriation, distribution, and receipt of surplus. So that is why Marx chose the entry point of class. We will present today the capitalist economy following Capital Volume 1's analysis, entering through the discussion of commodities produced under simple commodity production. Within simple commodity production, which means basically that it's petty production, that is, people, no workers are employed, the product becomes a commodity, the labor power is not a commodity. You work with it's like the cottage industry, say. Within simple commodity production, we discuss the meaning and significance of abstract labor. This is a rather difficult concept. We'll come to this. We also discuss commodity fetishism within simple commodity production. Marx starts from simple commodity production and builds up to capitalist fundamental class process, which is the point of entry into the analysis of capitalism, while commodity is the entry point into the presentation. Now, this is significant. There is a large literature on this, that the point of entry into the analysis, Marx doesn't start capital from where he started his analysis. He starts from a different point, that is commodity, for reasons which we shall elaborate. We elaborate surplus value as source of profit and argue its dependence on emergence of labor power commodity through the process of primitive accumulation. Surplus value is the source of profit. We'll see why, and we will see that it is surplus value emerges only when there is primitive accumulation has been completed and labor power has become a commodity. So primitive accumulation, this is the element of force that is necessary supplement to the logical development of circuit of capital from the commodity circuit. See, Marx discusses how from the commodity circuit within simple commodity production, you go on to the capitalist commodity circuit, and this is simply a logical process. But we will see that he mentions also that even the commodity itself to exist to in a large quantities in large proportion, there has to be capitalist relations of production which are dependent on primitive accumulation, that is the seizure of the means of production from the people who are laboring, and this is a violent process. So it is the development and the structure of capitalism have both built into them the element of violence. This is the element of force that is necessary, that is the necessary supplement to the logical development of the circuit of capital from the commodity circuit. We will later interrogate labor power commodity to bring out its necessary connection with primitive accumulation and alienated labor and show the master servant relation within the factory, contradicting the equality outside. So as a result of this primitive accumulation, labor power becomes a commodity, and this implies a certain thing called alienation. That is, the laborer no longer enjoys laboring. Labor is no longer the manifestation of the humanness of the laborer. Now, this creates a master-servant relation. We'll discuss this later. We will also later indicate other moments of overdetermination in the history and in the structure of capitalist fundamental class process. Following Marx's presentation in Capital Volume 1, entry point into the discourse of capitalism is commodity. It is commodity which is bartered against one another, and it is produced within the simple commodity production economy. That is where, as I was saying, it's like a cottage industry where you produce with your own or your family labor. This requires explanation, as we are starting from commodities, whereas we had argued for the entry point of class using the philosophical insights of Marx. Commodity is the entry point into Marx's presentation of the capitalist economy, not into its analysis. Now, this will become clearer as we go along. A commodity is, this is a quote from Marx, a mysterious thing, as Marx notes in Capital Volume 1. We start from commodities, things that are bought and sold at prices based on value, or more precisely, abstract labor value.
Pranab Basu, you are on mute. You were at mute. Unmute yourself.
No, Pranab, you are audible. You are absolutely audible.
Okay, then there is
Pranab
some
Basu,
point.
you are probably mute.
I'm not mute.
No, no,
Very faint.
Shumanto Babu,
Very faintly some
I
sound
think
is coming.
I think your connection is disturbing somehow. Pranab Kanti Basu is absolutely audible.
So I will go along. I will continue.
Yes,
So,
yes, please.
we start from commodities, things that are, what are commodities? Simply things that are bought and sold at prices based on value, or more precisely, on abstract labor value. Now, this abstract labor will become clearer. We will elaborate this. This abstraction, following Marx's dialectical method of overdetermination, This abstraction has been called real abstraction, as opposed to abstractions in the mind or ideational abstractions, like, say, Hegelian abstraction. Now, Hegelian abstraction, like we discussed, is that Hegel starts his journey of the philosophy of right. He starts the journey from pure will, free will. Now, free will is simply you're imagining that if I were free to do whatever I desire. So this is this is an individual thinking about freedom. It is all in the mind. It's all an internal thing. Then you think. Then again, the antithesis, pure externality. So when this is also produced in the mind, that if I think now my body is there, I can't do whatever I want, etc., etc. We had seen this. So Marx's abstraction, abstract labor, the idea of abstract labor is called real abstraction, as opposed to, say, Hegelian abstraction, which is in the mind. Real abstraction is the product of a specific social order, a class formation. It is not an essence or a generality formed in thought in and by itself. This is the product of a certain stage of history, of a certain class formation. It is only at a particular historical moment or juncture that economic agents perceive the need for comparing, that is, rendering equivalent things that are concretely different, things that differ from each other in use value. So the things always differ from each other, produce things always differ from each other in use value, in their usefulness. A shirt, a table, a pen, the computer, these are all have different uses, so they are different. But it is with this difference, one could live with this difference until another particular type of society was born, where you had to equate, in spite of these things being different, one had to somehow make them equivalent in order to trade in the market. So at this juncture, the idea of abstract labor was born. To be comparable, social individuals must imagine that the effort they have put into the making of each of these different objects, mind you, we are talking of simple commodity production where people own their own means of production and produce with their own labor. To be comparable, social individuals must imagine that the effort they have put into the making of each of these different objects, though actually different, must somehow be reducible to a common substance. This common substance, which is socially necessary but not really existing, is called abstract labor. You see, you are producing different things and you have to compare them. Then, because each one is laboring to produce something, so you think that, well, there must be our labors must be comparable in some way in order for the products to be exchangeable. Then couldn't we start from the presentation of capital, the presentation of capital from this real abstraction process and its class basis? Perhaps, but we are following the trajectory of Capital Volume 1, which then begs the question, why did Marx start from commodities? He could have started from, well, we need this real abstraction, there is this capitalist system, etc., etc. That could be the starting point. Then why does Marx start from commodities? There are a variety of reasons. One could be to maintain comparability with classical political economy, which dealt with markets almost entirely. You see, what Marx calls vulgar or surface economics. They dealt with what could be seen on the surface in the market. In order to start from a simple, or it could be in order to start from a simple economy and build up to the complex capitalist economy, etc. There could be various reasons. We are not going to all of these reasons. Now, this is a quotation from Grundriss, Introduction to the Method of Political Economy. Marx says, he gives a reason for starting from commodities. These classes in turn are an empty phrase. So if I start from class, he says that these classes in turn are an empty phrase if I am not familiar with the elements on which they rest. For example, wage labor, capital, etc. These latter in turn presuppose exchange, division of labor, prices, etc. For example, capital is nothing without wage labor, without value, money, price, etc. So here you have the reason, Marx stating a reason why he starts from commodities. This is the simplest thing. From there, you build up to the more complex capitalist fundamental class process. Starting from simple commodity production, Capital Volume 1's presentation builds up to the capitalist fundamental class process. To repeat, class is the entry point into the analysis of the capitalist economic system. But commodities produced within a simple commodity producing economy is the entry point into Marx's presentation in Capital. That is, he doesn't, the manner in which he built his analysis is not the same as the manner in which he presents, and we are following his presentation because, as he says, that you cannot, if you start with classes, people will be foxed. This is a quote from Marx again, Capital Volume 1. The wealth of those societies in which the capitalist mode of production prevails presents itself as an immense accumulation of commodities, its unit being a single commodity, money. Our investigation must therefore begin with the analysis of a commodity. But what kind of social production do we start from? The mode of production in which the product takes the form of a commodity or is produced directly for exchange is the most general and most embryonic form of bourgeois production. This is the form from which bourgeois production starts. That is what he says. It is a breeding ground. In other words, simple commodity production, no hired labor, petty production for barter. Owners of means of production produce with their own or family labor. Product, not the labor power that goes into its production, takes the form of a commodity. He says that is the product takes the form of commodity. It's not, we begin from this situation, not where labor power has become a commodity. This economy has the seeds of bourgeois production, and that is why it is called embryonic form. Marx starts his presentation from simple commodity production or petty production economy. This does not imply a historical stage from which capital evolved. In his mode of presentation, he prefers to start from this theoretically conceived economy because capitalist economic processes, because he can elaborate certain concepts, as he says in the first quotation, the quotation we just talked about. He can elaborate certain concepts which are necessary for the analysis of the capitalist economic processes. He can elaborate these concepts with simplicity. In fact, as we will see later, Marx comments that for all or most of the products to be commodities, capitalism is historically necessary. So it is not as if simple commodity production, barter economy was the first kind of economy. From there, historically, and from there it moved on to a money-using economy, and from there it moved on to a trader economy, etc., etc. It's not that. He is simply starting from a theoretically constructed economy where he can elaborate certain concepts which he can then use to build the more complex structure of capitalist fundamental class process. We start with barter exchange. You give a table, you get two shirts. Suppose that this is what happens in the market. One is a carpenter is producing a table, a weaver is producing shirts, and they exchange a table for two shirts. The exchange occurred because you needed the shirts you did not produce, and the other needed a table that the other did not produce. What does that mean? It means that those who are producing tables are not producing shirts, those who are producing shirts are not producing tables. So this is what is called the social division of labor. You are a carpenter and the other party is a weaver. So neither is self-sufficient, neither in production nor in consumption. What you produce, part you have to give to the other. What you consume, part you have to get from the other. But just because you produce the shirt, you did not have the automatic right to dispose it. Neither had the weaver the right to dispose of, because you produced the table, it should be, you did not have the right to dispose of it, and neither had the weaver the right to dispose of shirts. Consider a case where all products belong to the community as a whole. There are the instances of this, and this is what Marx called primitive communism. Well, tribal economy would be an approximation of that, not the modern day what we call the tribal economy, because it has been penetrated through and through with the commercial structures, by the commercial structures. So in a community where, in a closed community where some people are producing this, some people are producing that, some people are hunting, some people are cooking, some people are weaving, etc., etc. But the hunter is not the owner of the beast hunted. The weaver is not the owner of the cloth woven. It all comes together in a communal pool, and then the distribution of this pool is decided according to some criteria which is decided by the community. A particular historical circumstance is therefore necessary for exchange to be possible. What is that? Private property right has to be socially recognized. That is, I produce shirts and I am the owner of that. You produce tables, you are the owner of that. Social division of labor implies that there is economic interdependence. The carpenter needs shirts, the weaver needs tables. So then comes the division, this question, how to allocate social labor. That is society's total labor, how to allocate it between this branch of production and that branch of production. There are two ways in which this can be done. One is what we call the command system, say feudal or consensual tribal. In the feudal system, the feudal lord says that you do this, you do that. Consensual, a tribal economy where everyone decides together, or there is some way in which a tribal chief is elected or selected, whatever, and that chief decides. So this is a system, whether it is command or consensus, it is a system where it is directly decided through man-man interaction. The human beings together in that community, they decide. They decide, or it is forced on them, whatever. But it is through a human being relation. And there is another solution, the market economy, indirectly decided through relation between commodities. This is where the law of value comes in. What, who will do, how many people will be weaving, how many people will be building, making tables, etc. All this is decided through the law of value. Now, what is this law of value? It says that prices are equal to abstract labor value of commodity. Now, this again, I'm repeating, is true in a simple commodity producing economy. We will see that prices are not equal to abstract labor value in the capitalist economy, where they are proportional to something called transformed labor values. We will come to that later. An important fact not elaborated at this point, the transition from a non-market economy to an exchange-based economy involves changes in the way people see the world and themselves. Change in nature of subjectivity, that is the way in which I think of myself, the way in which my thought develops. The transition is not a pure economic event. This involves what is called commodity fetishism. So this transition, this is not a very simple thing that from a community you go to a market exchange. There has to be a lot of changes in the way in my mentality is built. And so this involves cultural changes also, and which is captured in the concept of commodity fetishism. Now, first of all, what is this law of value? Now, how does Marx argue that prices are equal to abstract labor values? Marx starts this way, that commodities, that is whatever is bought and sold in the market, have three things in common. They all have prices. Marx calls this exchange value. That was the term used at that point of time. They are all useful. Marx calls this use value. And they are all the products of labor. Hence, prices of commodities must be explained either by use value or by the labor content of commodities. Now, use values are qualitatively different, so not quantitatively comparable. That is, a table cannot do the work of two shirts. But according to exchange value, one table is exchanging for two shirts. So use value cannot explain prices. Hence, Marx concludes that labor content or values must explain prices. But if use values are qualitatively different, so are concrete labor hours. That is, 1 hour of labor of the carpenter is different from 1 hour of labor of weaver. So, just as you cannot compare the use value, so how can you compare the number of hours worked in producing a table with the number of hours worked in producing two shirts? Now, why are concrete labors not comparable? Two reasons. They have different types of skill. They produce things that are qualitatively different in use value. So obviously the carpenter has a different kind of skill from the weaver. They may also, and the second reason, they may have different degrees of skill or intensity. That is, even if the same skill, same kind of skill is required for producing a shirt as for a table, a cloth as for a table, it may be that the carpenter is more skilled, or the weaver is more skilled, so different degree of skill or intensity. That is, one producer may be lazier than the other. So there are different reasons why you cannot compare the labor hours worked in the carpentry and with the labor hours worked in the weaving household. So price cannot be determined by concrete labor content. So abstract labor content determines price. But Why not abstract utilities? So abstract labor is something, what is that? We will see what it is. But why are we talking of if we talk of abstract labor, then why can't we talk of abstract utilities? And this is exactly what mainstream economics does. Because Marx says that because utilities are defined in difference, that is, according to Marx, utilities are nothing if not specific to particular commodities. But if one can think of labor in general, that is abstract labor, why not abstract utility? This is actually what the neoclassicals argue. This is the neoclassical position implied in what is called the utility function. This is a technical thing, we need not go into that. What this utility function says is that each individual enjoys a certain level of satisfaction or abstract utility that is determined by all the things that the individual owns, and maybe as assets or maybe as for consuming the shirt, the Punjabi I'm wearing, what I'm eating, the house that I have, etc. It's all go into deciding my total utility, my total satisfaction. It is determined by all the things that I own. Satisfaction may remain unchanged, and here, if I increase one and decrease the other, satisfaction may remain unchanged. If, say, my own shirt is the number of shirts I own is decreased by one, while the number of fish that I consume is increased by three, it may be that my level of satisfaction remains unchanged, because when I reduce the consumption of one, my of anything, my satisfaction declines, and when I increase the consumption of anything, my satisfaction increases. So if I reduce my shirts by one and I increase my fish consumption by three, it may be that my satisfaction remains unchanged. And this would make then shirts comparable with fish and so exchangeable. So what is the difference between this abstraction and Marx's abstraction? There is a significant difference between the two abstractions. While abstract utility is based on a theoretically constituted abstract individual, that is, to me personally, one shirt gives the same utility as three fish. On the other hand, abstract labor is constituted through the social practice of exchange. That is, when the carpenter and weaver are coming together, they are bargaining, and then they come to this conclusion that, well, the labor that I do and the labor that you do, if we compare them, then one table is equivalent to two shirts. So abstract labor is constituted through the social practice of exchange. This social practice embeds commodity fetishism in individual consciousness. We will take this up later. Now, what is abstract labor? If we make this from Marx, if we make abstraction from its use value, we make abstraction at the same time from the material elements and shapes that make the product a use value. We see in it no longer a table, a house, a yarn, or any other useful thing. Its existence as a material thing is put out of sight. Neither can it any longer be regarded as the product of the labor of the joiner, the mason, the spinner, or any other definite kind of productive labor. That is, you cannot say that these carpenters or weavers' labor. Along with the useful qualities of the products themselves, we put out of sight both the useful character of the various kinds of labor embodied in them and the concrete forms of that labor. There is nothing left but what is common to them all. All are reduced to one and the same sort of labor, human labor. What remains when we abstract from all useful, concrete, sensuous, material properties of the commodity? And Marx answers, then the products are merely the products of labor, not of a particular concrete act of labor, but rather of abstract human labor, labor as such. If we elaborate this, what is it not? It is not the labor that produces any specific thing. It is not a labor that has a varying degrees of skill or intensity. This is what it is not. Then what is it? It is labor that is only the characteristic that it produces private property, not common property, because its product is exchanged. We are thinking of the abstraction is born because things are exchanged. So what is this labor? It is a labor which has only this character, that it produces things for exchange. Can abstract labor be measured? No, because it is an essence. We can conceptualize abstract labor, work back to it from its manifestation in prices. So abstract labor can be conceptualized only in rupees, not hours. You see, uh, mm, this is a very common example, that essence and manifestation. See, people who believe in God, if you tell them that, where is God? Show me God. No, I can't show you. Now, would the atheist then be right? Not at all. Because the believer says that God is the essence. He cannot be seen, nirgun. He is manifested in all things. So, just like that, abstract labor, does it not exist? You say that, well, you cannot, if you cannot measure it, cannot exist. No, not so. It is because unless we conceptualize, it was conceptualized, there's something which equates these things. Otherwise, how could exchange have taken place? So, abstract labor can be conceived on conceptualized only in rupees, not hours. That is, in the prices in which they are manifested. By definition, the abstract labor equivalent of a commodity is its price. Abstract labor cannot be independently measured. It is conceived only in its manifestation, that is price. So it is conceived in rupees, not hours. If the price in equilibrium of a table is rupees 400, then the abstract labor content of table is equivalent to rupees 400. This is a definitional requirement and not to be proved, as value cannot be independently measured or seen like God. If abstract labor cannot be measured, if this price equal to abstract labor content, this cannot be verified. Then in what sense does abstract labor value determine price? What is the use of the concept of abstract labor? This is obviously a question that occurs. Abstract labor determines price in affective sense. That is, it's part of my subjectivity. That is how I think. That is how the person within the simple commodity producing economy thinks. Work done by individual as index of worth of product was part of the new subjectivity, that is individualism. This is linked to commodity fetishism, which we shall argue presently. Abstract labor determines price in an affective sense. That is, so how many tables would I exchange with how many shirts? One table, how many shirts would I do? Now, then there is a social interaction, and they decide that the kind of labor that they do, this would be the equivalence, proper equivalence. So the abstract labor it's an affective sense. It determines my subjective decision. Work done by an individual as index of worth of product was part of the new subjectivity, that is individualism. Two reasons why the concept is useful in the Marxian scheme. One is that labor is important because of class-focused entry point determined by Marx's preoccupation with exploitation. So since Marx wanted, Marxian political economy is all about exploitation. So labor becomes central, a focal point. So that is one reason why abstract labor is necessary to the Marxian scheme. Secondly, there is a polemical, an argumentative side to it. You see, Marx, as we had been stressing this again and again, that Marx is not born out of nothing. He's the product of a particular historical moment. The Enlightenment has come, and in the Enlightenment discourse attributed wealth to human beings, that is, to its labor. Because Enlightenment said that man can, through his reason alone, man can attain the truth of things. So it is human beings. There is nothing more superior to human beings. So whatever we produce, that is also part of that is also attributable to human being. So then Marx takes this over to build his theory of exploitation. So within the current scenario, Enlightenment discourse, human beings were the source of everything. And Marx takes this over and builds it into a theory of exploitation. So this is the second reason why abstract labor is significant, is important to the Marxian scheme. Now, why is it, how does this labor theory of value work? For simplicity, assume there is no difference between concrete labor and abstract labor. That is, there is no difference in type or degree of skills or efficiency. So then in that case, abstract labor and concrete labor of the uh, carpenter, of any carpenter, would be equivalent to the labor of any weaver. So no difference in type or degree of skills or of efficiency. So abstract labor also measurable in hours, just like concrete labor. We are also ignoring the value of inputs other than labor. One work day, 10 hours, say, produces one table. It also produces two shirts. By law of value, the price of table should be proportional to 10 hours and price of shirt should be proportional to 5 hours. Therefore, in exchange, one table should exchange for two shirts. Suppose too many tables have been made. That is, too much social labor has been allocated to carpentry. We want to find out how this allocation of labor, social labor, which previously was decided by command, by either command or by consent, either in a feudal system or in a community system. Now this is socially divided labor. How much labor should go into carpentry, how much into weaving, etc. This has to be decided through the market. So how is it done? Suppose too many tables had been made, there is too much social labor allocated to carpentry. So one table has to sell against one shirt because too many tables has been made, the price of tables has gone down. It was in equilibrium, it should exchange for two shirts, but actually it is exchanging for one shirt. In order to clear the inventory of tables, because too many tables have been produced. So the stock of tables has been cleared, so you reduce the price to sell one table for one shirt. Carpenter will in that case switch to weaving. Why? Because with a day's labor, the carpenter can make two shirts. Why? Because all the labor is substitutable, as we have assumed. But by making the table and exchanging, he gets only one shirt. Through the day he works, makes a table, and one table he gets one shirt. So he will switch to making shirts. Now what will this then do? The supply of tables will go down. The market demand for shirts will go down. Why? Because the carpenter has switched to making shirts. So carpenter is not buying shirts in the market. So the supply of tables goes down and the demand for shirts goes down. In this case, when the supply of anything goes down, its price will go up. And if the demand for anything goes down, its price will go down. So similarly, the price of tables will go up, the price of shirts will come down, and this will continue until one table is equal to two shirts. This is the exchange rate. So in that case, you see, when this equivalence, which was in the mind, they had deliberated that our labor is equivalent in this way. So this abstract labor concept, one table is equal to two shirts, but then because of overproduction of tables, one table was selling for one shirt, and so there was too much labor being allocated to table production, too little to shirt production. And now then through this adjustment, if the supply of tables comes down and the supply of shirts goes up, and there is ultimately proper allocation of social labor. So this is how the market allocates. Previously, the allocation was either through command or through consent. We have been talking about this commodity fetishism. Now, it is time that we took this up. What is commodity fetishism? Why does it come into work when exchange economy is in place? The proper social division of labor, which is a relation between human beings. How many people should be working, should be producing tables, how many people should be producing shirts, etc. It's a relation between human beings, is achieved through the law of value. What is this law of value? It's a relation between commodities. A social relation between men appears as a relation between commodities. This is commodity fetishism, like God fetish that we discussed in the context of thesis on Feuerbach. Sorry. Man projects his nature and creates God. God then appears to have created man. This is the biblical story. Similarly, man puts his labor into commodities. Relation between commodities, that is the value relation, then appear to determine social relation. What is social relation? The division of labor in various lines of production. So, so this is so commodity fetishism is simply like God fetish. There is but a difference. What is this difference? The law of value actually determines social division of labor. There's a material basis of commodity fetishism, unlike God fetishism. There's a material basis which someone called Rubin argued. In the references, you will see the references, but actually determines not in the sense that measurable cost determines price through some kind of markup, but in an affective sense. Actually determines social division of labor, because the people exchanging, they get together and they believe that, well, the labor of the carpenter and the labor of the weaver is such. So this is an affective, this is part of the subjectivity. Affective sense, commodity fetishism is not false consciousness. It is not something you're wrong, you have a wrong belief. Say we believe that black is bad, so and white is good, and it works in the marriage market, it works in advertisements, it works everywhere. So it is not that kind of a false consciousness. Affective sense, see, commodity fetishism is not false consciousness. It is not a false belief that relation commodities determine relations between human beings, but a determinant of subjectivity. Private property, individualism versus commons and communities. So when you have private property and individualism, you have a different kind of consciousness, and here it must appear that commodities are determining the division of labor, because this division of labor is taking place through the market. This entails a cultural transformation that results from violence of primitive accumulation, to which we will discuss. The alienation in the real world, the result of capitalism, is overcome through the projection of a whole infinite entity like God, to whom we leave our fate. See, you see, uh, like uh, Marx explains God fetish, that unlike what Feuerbach argues, that, well, it is if people are understand that it is just a fetish, then this belief in God will no longer be there. This will not create any problems. But Marx says that no, it is the result of the society itself. It is result of the alienation created within the class-based society that God is created. So it is not as if it is separate. Man is simply out of nothing projecting his human essence and making God. It is because of social inequities that this projection to God is taking place. So similarly, the alienation in the real world is overcome through the projection of a whole infinity, to whom we leave our fate. This is a moment of overdetermination. We cannot contest the logic of the market. Now, you see, that is what is happening even when we see the price of cooking gas rising to infinity, the market prices shooting up like anything, and still we stay content. We do not protest this, not in a very major way, and we go on re-electing the people who have brought this misery to us. You see, but previously, if you go back to the 40s and the 50s, even if you raised a tram fare by a minimum, then also there would be a large political turmoil. So now this is it is like, as we have created this market, we have created these market fetish, and we believe commodities, they believe rules are fair. So there is nothing to be done. We cannot contest the logic of the market, not if we remain chained to what we see on the surface. Cultural hegemony is bred by the economy. The mystery of the economy cannot be penetrated or overcome unless the cultural hegemony is contested. So this is overdetermined. Cultural hegemony is created by the economy, and the mystery of the economy cannot be penetrated unless we can overcome this cultural hegemony of commodity fetishism. Now, affective sense needs to be elaborated. I think I'll skip this. Now, commodity fetishism has another significance that has been brought out by Amadeglio and Callery. Commodity fetishism is not false consciousness which commodity production breeds. Commodity fetishism is the product of a cultural political process which is a precondition for an exchange system. That is what we said, that how will things exchange unless the participants in the process of exchange think that there is a substance in them which makes them comparable. And since this is taking place in the time when of enlightenment, where human beings are assumed to be the progenitor of everything, so the common something must be human labor. So this human labor is, of course, not the number of hours worked in specific lines of production. So CF is the product of a cultural political process which is a precondition for an exchange system. The products of different kinds of labors are equated in the market. This is only possible under the condition that the laborers see the different kinds of labor as being quantitatively comparable. A particular kind of subjectivity that of individual property owners has to be produced. This is the affective sense of abstract labor, a kind of myth that the ruling order breeds in order to hide its true exploitative or oppressive character. So we all suffer under this commodity fetishism, that it is the commodities which determine how social division of labor take. It's the commodity, the market, which determines everything. So this is a myth that the ruling order breeds, and this is not a conspiracy. This is not just a logical effect. Neither is it neither is it conspiratorially produced. It is, among other things, the product of dissolution of community ties, of primitive accumulation, which produces labor power as commodity. So it is this primitive accumulation which actually creates this illusion of abstract labor, this illusion of commodity fetishism. But then, are we not speaking of petty producers economy, where the products of labor but not labor power itself has become commodities, unlike in the capitalist economy where labor power is a commodity? So how can we say that commodity fetishism, it's okay if we say that it is not false consciousness, it's okay if we say it's not conspiratorially produced, but how can we say that it is the result of primitive accumulation when we are talking of petty production economy or simple commodity production? That is where Marx is starting from. True, but let us listen to Marx. Now, this is a quotation again from volume 1 of Capital. The economic categories already discussed by us, this is my insertion, in discussing simple commodity production or petty production economy, bear the stamp of history. Definite historical conditions are necessary that a product may become a commodity. It must not be produced as the immediate means of subsistence of the producer himself. That is, the weaver should not produce his own just for himself, shirts for himself only. Had we gone further and inquired under what circumstances all or even the majority of products takes the form of commodities, we should have found that this can only happen with production of a very specific kind. What is that? Capitalist production. Such an inquiry, however, would have been foreign to the analysis of commodities. So what is saying, that for all or even most of the things to become commodities, you need capitalist production. So you started from simple commodity production, but then at a later point, Marx is introducing this idea that for simple commodity production to be an all-encompassing thing, it had to be capitalist commodity production. So historically, capitalism has to be there before commodity exchange takes place. Now, you see, this is why is Marx saying this? Marx is saying this because it is only when people have been dispossessed of their labor, when capitalism has been born, that the mass of people, they have to get their purchasing power by selling whatever they have, that which is the labor power. Will come to this, and then buy the commodities that they need. So then most of the things become commodities to be bought and sold in the market. Now, so that is why he's saying that it is not possible for petty production economy, single commodity production, to be there on a large scale unless capitalist production is there. So capitalist production can only is the precondition. So primitive accumulation is the precondition for capitalist for commodity production. The definite historical circumstances that Marx is referring to include the culturally conditions, specific subjectivity necessary for commodity exchange to attain acceptability, hence stability. Marx is then saying that these conditions can only happen with the production of a very specific kind, that is, capitalist production. This introduces the centrality of the violence of primitive accumulation even into the concept of abstract labor values. Though the concept of abstract labor is presented initially in the context of simple commodity production, which does not need primitive accumulation as a precondition, we see that it is only when primitive accumulation breaks down the community sanctioned requirement of different concrete labor. See, in the community, the community said that this is the amount that should go in for weaving, this is the amount of labor that should go in for carpentry, this is the amount of labor that should go in for crop production. But it is when primitive accumulation breaks down the community that that the socially divided concrete labors have to be thought as comparable because of a common substance embedded in them, that is abstract labor. It is only when this social allocation by community breaks down that you have to this market has to function, and for the market to function, the subjective, the affective concept of abstract labor has to develop. Community feeling breaks down, fellow feeling, ethics, all these break down. We measure ourselves and others not on the basis of human relations, but on the basis of two relations with commodities. That is, the man-commodity relation now determines everything. One is the property relation, how much we own, and the other is the income relation, how much we earn. Exchange values only are important. Use values drop out of Marxian analysis. And this is what Marx says in various places. Use value exists independently of exchange value. Use value now purely personal, and so not communicable. So use values are no longer previously according to the use of society. How much cloth did I need? How much did the community need? How many tables did the community need? How much wheat did the community need? According to the particular use values, the need of these particular use values, labor was allocated. But now this drops out. Now use values exist, of course they exist, but now they're purely personal and not communicable. Like I was saying, that the utility function, my utility function, is not, I cannot communicate my utility function to you. It is a purely personal thing, so it is not communicable. This dropping out, which Marx calls variety subtraction or abstraction, though analytically necessary, is problematic, particularly for political mobilization. We'll talk about this later. In today's world, commodity fetishism takes a new meaning. Use values frequently have no independent meaning for the rich. They actually, exchange value determines use value. You see, people go to the shopping malls, they buy according to brands. Why? Because you buy a Reebok shoe. The same shoe you can buy, say, Campus or something, Ajanta, and you'll get much cheaper. But you buy something which is worth 16,000 rupees, and you tell people that I am using a walking shoe is worth 16,000 rupees. So it is the exchange value which is itself becoming use value. It is an index of utility to me. So use value is determined by exchange value. This is consumerism. Rich buys Reebok not because he or she needs that shoe, but because exchange value signifies a status for the buyer. Now, I think I will stop here, and the journey from this bartered economy to the capitalist economy we leave for the next day, because already we have taken up 1 hour, and I would invite questions at this point.
Now I would invite questions from the audience, and after those questions are put, I myself I have a question that I'll put at the end.
Okay. Devashish, are there any questions? If there are no other questions, Devashish, you can start with yours. I suppose it may break the ice.
So should I put my question now?
Yes, I think so, because no one is.
Okay. You talked about the exchange rate between chart and table, that is, mm, so I just wanted to know that when we are talking about exchange rate between the chart and the table, so how that social exchange rate is being reached at?
It must be through some sort of bargaining that the exchange rate evolves in a simple commodity producing economy. And this social bargaining, there will be a feeling that my labor is worth so much of yours. There will be a feeling of the worth of labor at the back of the mind of this bargaining. So this is in this sense, this Callery and Roberts, they argue, American and Callery, they argue that abstract labor is an affective category. It is part of our subjectivity, once necessary for exchange to be possible. So there must be some kind of bargaining.
I would just like to add one point. I am still yet to get to the point, that uh, mm, suppose you there is the involvement of 8 hours labor in the production of something. Say in the in the production of of the table, and there is just say 1 hour labor involved in the production of a shirt. So ho- unless there is unless we incorporate the issue of need, that
What you are saying is, if I am getting you right, is that there should be some comparability of the clock hours. Is that what you are saying?
not only the clock hours, in terms of market economy, uh, I don't want to use the word utility. Uh, Rather, I would go, but there isn't there is a sort of a element of demand involved in it, or the priority of people, priority of the people who are using both table and charts.
Yes, as we argued, you see, because you make too many tables and the price of tables will fall below what is sanctioned according to expert labor value. Now, you see, let me elaborate a bit. You see, one can have a perfectly, what we have now, a very formal system of what is called the general equilibrium analysis, where you don't really have to go into something behind prices. Now, a standard neoclassical economics has something behind prices, which is abstract utility. Marxian economics is something behind prices, which is abstract labor. Now, if the general equilibrium analysis would be the best example of what Marx calls the vulgar economics, where you don't try to explain anything. Now, the moment you try to explain anything, there will be a question of where do you start from? And because everything determines everything, then the question of starting point is a matter of political decision, as I have been insisting throughout. The decision of mainstream economics that what is behind prices? Utility. What is behind utility is individual subjectivity. You have individual utility functions. Okay. Now, this is because you believe in a certain kind of order, you believe in the myth of the civil society, you believe that human emancipation, the best form of human emancipation is individuals with citizens' rights. As opposed to this, Marx believes that uh, in this system, what was previously the discrimination, the repression within the political apparatus is shifted now to the civil society. Through the working of the market, as we will discuss in the next class, through the working of the market alone, some people are being forced into slavery, producing surplus value, and some people are living off this surplus value. So it is the political focus which compels, I would say, Marx and Marxists to insist that there is something in some form labor is there at the back of the prices. So then we can talk, then it comes to a question of abstraction and abstract labor, because concrete labor hours are not comparable. I think Rajesh is wanting to ask a question.
Huh. Yes, Rajesh. Please, please.
Yes,
Uh, you
Rajesh
know,
has a
uh, um,
question. Yes.
I think, but I can wait. You can finish answering the question.
I think there, I have not much to add to that. You see, because abstract labor is, as I was saying, abstract labor is it is, and it is not something which is observed, and you cannot verify whether price is equal to abstract labor. So I know that there is a degree of uneasiness, but unfortunately we do not have that degree of uneasiness when we say that prices at the margin prices are equal to the ratio of marginal utilities. That is for Devashish, for people who understand.
Uh,
Yes.
my question is also related to this, and I think I agree with you that one should not. It is the discomfort with treating abstract labor as a conceptual rather than a empirical, element. Should not be more than the discomfort that we have when we say that each individual has a preference ordering. It's the same thing. So you need to construct a theory, and therefore you need to start with some concepts. So discomfort, if there is, should be similar in both cases. But I have a different question. Abstract labor, as you said, is labor. You are working back from uh, manifested prices to the concept of abstract labor, and in that sense, the abstract labor is nothing but labor that produces private property. Now, in that sense, is it necessary for abstract labor? Is it necessary for the private property in labor power to exist to talk about abstract labor? Is it a condition? Is it historically specific? This working back from prices to abstract labor, is it historically conditional upon labor power being a commodity itself? And the reason I'm saying is that we have had slavery during the early days of capitalism, and we had commodities produced by the production, slave class process. So in that sense, those were also commodities. Can we talk of commodities being measured in or thought of in terms of abstract labor? Definitely, these were private property, but not private property in the labor power. So, is it not necessary or not? Is it necessary or not to have private property labor power to talk of abstract labor? Uh, is it a condition?
Uh, um, I'm not very good at history, but I just theoretically thinking about the question, I would say that, you did have market exchange in slave economy, and you do have market exchange in capitalist economy, and Marx really works back from the capitalist primitive accumulation. Now, what is the significance of primitive accumulation? Uh, Marx is saying that within the simple primitive accumulation, what it does is, apart from other things, it breaks up the community. No? Primitive accumulation, Marx is really emphasizing its working in the agricultural sector, with the enclosure movement, etc., etc. So it's a political force being applied to dispossess. Now, this dispossession then breaks up the community. As you know, this leads to the migration of peasants to the urban areas, breaks up the community, and so it breaks up the kind of distribution apparatus which did not depend on the market. In that sense, Marx says that for all or even most of the products to become commodities, it is necessary that the capitalism is necessary. Now, capitalism is necessary because I think this is the sense in which he says it. Now, as regards the comparison with the slave economy, actually, I would confess that my knowledge about that is very limited, but I would hazard this opinion that in a slave economy, you see, all or most of the products would probably not become commodities. It is the slave owners. I'm not sure how it works, but I suppose that the slaves, would they be? Is it that purchased commodities are distributed to slaves as their subsistence goods, or is it produced within the slave economy itself, and part is retained for? I'm not sure, but this is the sense in which he says primitive accumulation is necessary for all or most of the products to become commodities. Uh, but then, of course, he does not discuss slave economy, and I would have to think about this. I do not know about the slave
I was also thinking because in the well into the 19th century, when international global exchange of commodities was well established, you had both North America, South America, India, Asia, Europe being part of one global network, and we had different class processes in place. Latin American Marxists had always argued that the rise of capitalist class process was sort of went hand in hand with the development of feudalism in South America. The slave economy was literally brought back, in plantations and so on. Uh, and India to this day continues to be largely composed of peasants in the agriculture sector. So these are very different modes of production. Well, I
I
understand.
think, yes, what you are saying makes a lot of sense. And actually, unfortunately, as you remarked in a private conversation, following the trajectory of Marx's discussion condemns one to a rather Eurocentric exposition. That is really a problem. Uh, now, what, but still, I would say that what is important, significant here is what I was saying. The question of what we were trying to elaborate is the question of overdetermination. That there must be force. The market, simple commodity production is a market which appears to be working on itself without any kind of force. Now, for the commodity markets to be in, for most things to become commodities, there is an element of force which will overdetermine the
Yes.
economic working.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is a significant point, and I think that that would also relate to what you are saying, what happens in Latin America and in South America also. And so, I think that would be the more general point, instead of saying that primitive accumulation in the sense in which Marx is using. Probably then that would encompass the questions raised by the Latin Americans. And it is true that using the exposition of capital, it becomes very Eurocentric. That is true.
Yes. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
I don't think there are other
Okay,
questions.
in the in that case, I would hand it over to Dipro to conclude.
Okay, yeah, so we should conclude now. So we are meeting in the next Friday, sharp at 8. And good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.